You heard that lady. Her overheads, monthly overheads, about 21,000
Yeah.
Ghana cedis. And she says this is basic stuff. It's not like she's buying luxury stuff. I mean,
Consumables.
yeah, fuel 6,000. That is believable. That is believable.
Of course.
I have a car that costs quite a lot to fill the tank.
And if you're spending, somebody said this morning, 7 hours in traffic every day.
Imagine. Imagine. When you feel that yeah. I may spend more than she does on fuel. So, but whose salary is 21,000 a month? Who? According to the Ghana Statistical Service, only 20% of Ghanaians earn more than 3,000 cedis a month. Only 20%. So the remaining 80% of us, we earn less than 3,000 Ghana cedis a month. How are Ghanaians living? That's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about the economics of it. We want to talk about the reality of it, and then we want to look at the future.
Right.
Right. Okay. So, Uncle Ken, if you don't mind, I'd love to start with you. Now, what is fueling this is good old inflation. Then, of course, you have the depreciation of the cedi. But help us understand. I mean, we all thought that inflation was improving. We were told that, it had come down from the dizzying heights of 50-something% to about 22% a couple of months ago. Why are prices still almost doubling every other time we turn our backs?
Kojo, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I was born in 1961 and I went to Form 1 in 1972. And I saw how our lifestyles changed from 72 onwards, to the point where in the mid-70s everybody was traveling. In terms of the management of this economy, Ghana has gone back to the 70s. We've really gone back to the 70s. And it will take us another 53 years to get to 2016. And by then, the world will be in 2069. I mean, here you have it. You're going to take an exam. You say you set your own questions. You say you set your own marking scheme. When the results come, you fail. I mean, you fail badly. For those of us that did A-level, you got sub. And then when you're asked, you say that your senior man was blocking you, or they were allowed to copy, and that it had rained, and the Odo River had overflowed. But meanwhile, your neighbors passed. You failed. So for me, and now you want to set another question to mark, and you are failing to respond to the reasons why you failed. I mean, my simple question is this, and I'm marking only one question. If the fundamentals are weak, what exposes you? It's the cedi. It's as simple as that. In 2016, we were around $1 to $4 cedis. Now we are over 16 and it's rising. And please call me when it gets to 20. I mean, we are being managed by Dr. Feelgoods. These are Dr. Feelgoods. These are doctors, these are Dr. Feelgoods who tell us, who give us the rhetoric, but are never able to deliver on what they talk about. I mean, we've presided, and I don't, all this is the same thing. We've presided over the largest transfer of private wealth to the state to mismanage. And Ghana is not at war. When a country is at war, that's when citizens are asked to make sacrifices. The cedi has collapsed. There's going to be high prices and inflation. Dr. Feelgoods are still telling us that things will become better. We have pensioners, private individuals queuing up for their miserable savings and pensions. We have young adults still living with their parents. with no prospect of moving out, with no prospect of a job. We have business closures. We have a financial sector cleanup where we spent over 25 billion cedis and nobody's even bothering telling us how the money was spent. Nobody, they can't even bother to tell us. We have the poisoning of Ghanaian waters. Our children are being poisoned. We are being poisoned. We have collapse of the energy sector. We have collapse of ECG. We have collapse of the cocoa board. The list is endless. And you know, Prof will give you all the figures. The figures are nice. But the bottom line is, it's about the value of the CD in your pocket. That's economics. I've always spoken truth to power in economics. I've been speaking for the last 15 years. I'll speak truth to power to the government. The value of the CD in our pocket is worthless. And this is due to pure mismanagement. Absolute mismanagement. We can't pay our children's school fees. We can't save. We can't eat properly. We can't afford to go to hospital. We can't take transport, you know. And what happens is that we all develop coping mechanisms. So you become poorer, and poorer. And I saw it. I saw it going to Kingsway. I saw it what we ate. I saw going to Form 1. I saw how our lives changed. You know, but the worst part of it all for me is that, you know, the mismanagement of the economy, the emotional toll is absolutely ridiculous. And the people that suffer the most are the affluent. You know, so it's okay to say I'll travel, but what happens? Our families are broken up, the community is broken up, homes are lying empty, and all this leads to anxiety, depression, and loneliness for those of us in and out of Ghana. We deserve better. I mean, forget about the figures. It's about the value of the seed in your pocket, and it's about being led by Dr. Feel Goods. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous. Why should we reduce this kind of poverty? I mean, why?
Yeah.
I mean that's my opening statement. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah. Absolutely ridiculous.
Thank you.
And that's my opening statement.
That's quite an opening for us to be getting on. Appreciate that indeed. We're joined by Professor Bokbin, who of course is at the University of Ghana Business School. He's a professor of finance and economics there. Prof, it's a pleasure. Good morning to you.
Yes, good morning, Kojo. And good morning to your co-host. Good morning to Ghanaians, and good morning to my big boss who just spoke. I'm not too sure whether I qualify to add anything to what he has said or even take away from it.
I know exactly what I'm going to ask you in a minute. But first, let me bring back Selom. And Selom, you see, I'm glad to have you because in addition to the work you do with Imani, you also run a business. So when you hear, you know, what these Ghanaians are saying, how much of it is reality for you? And in basic terms, I mean, Uncle Ken points out that, look, the fundamentals are weak. The CD is exposing us. But in basic terms, what exactly are we getting wrong on a repetitive basis, resulting in these astronomical increases that our salaries cannot keep up with?
So, there's a whole lot of things, but I think one of the biggest things that we've gotten wrong is our lack of appreciation for what I'll call value creation.
Right.
Every economy thrives on how much value you are able to add to the economy. So if you give me 100 cities and I'm able to, let's say, transform it and then add, let's say, 10 cities to it, that is extra value. Yeah. That value can then have a multiplier effect because it can then go on to do other things. Now, for a lot of people or for a lot of us, we have realized that even whatever little value that is there is being eroded daily. And there's a huge disregard for this kind of value because the government seems to be interested in making people so poor that any little populist, freebie giveaway should be something that should be valued. And why do I say this? I say this because, I mean, like has been said before, you have had an erosion of the CD to the extent that what people buy daily changes. Let me give you an example. I had a client who I was doing some stuff for. She needed to buy plywood. On the first week of October, a 3/4 inch plywood, the local type, was 250 to 260 cedis. Over the course of the month, till the last week of October, the prices of that plywood had increased to 300 cedis, and I was being told that if a couple of weeks more came, they were going to even increase the price further. That is about a 25 increase in the price of plywood and input that somebody is using for their job. 25% in 1 month. These are things that are not put in the so-called inflation basket for people to really, and then when the statisticians come out, they will say that, oh, the inflation is that. On the ground itself, the prices are changing daily. Somebody asked me for an estimate, and then that estimate really has a validity of about 1 week to 2 weeks, because by the time the person will even gather money and come, the prices would have changed.
Yeah.
And these things really affect not only those of us who are producing stuff for people, but even those who actually deal in these things. Because the problem is that when this CD value erodes, what happens is that by the time they are able to sell off their stock or their inventory, whatever they get plus the profit is not enough to even restock the same amount. If you go to Abosokai right now, a lot of spare parts dealers, for example, do not even have their own inventory anymore. They are now resellers for Chinese people because they cannot command, the actual importation of these spare parts on their own, because the monies that they make, it will not even be enough to cover the previous inventory that they had. If you bought 10 things to come and resell, you will not be able to make the amount of money after, let's say, a month or two that the inventory will be, finished. To be able to buy the 10, you might be able to buy only 7 or 6. Now that causes a shrinking in the market. If that spare parts dealer or people like us, our profits reduce, it means that we cannot pay enough workers. And if we cannot pay enough workers, those workers cannot feed their families. If they cannot feed their families, they cannot also go to school, and you have more poor people who only think that things like free SHS and the rest are the only things that can save them. Meanwhile, if we decided to think about the fact that we have to protect all these people, because you see, what is happening now is that we have a situation where the poverty levels, like has been said earlier, has reduced to the extent that I read a study that said that our poverty levels have now reached 1991 poverty levels. If you were around 1991, that was around the time when we used to only take things like jollof and Coca-Cola on Christmas Day. That is the extent to which we have gotten to right now today in Ghana. To think that we have been in a democracy where we have had civil society activity and all these things, and we have had this level of enlightenment, and then we have rather reversed our situation of poverty to pre-1991 levels, tells you a lot about the hardship that people are facing. And with such a scenario, it beggars belief that we are still like we have the Dr. Feelgoods completely ignoring these aspects of our lives and then trying to foist other things on us, or trying to create different issues to tell us that these are the main issues, when the matters of the pocket, matters of feeding the family, matters of paying rent are the big issues. But then the issue for me, the primary thing is this: we cannot kill off a whole slew or a whole segment or a whole stratum of the economy, which is the small business owners, the middle class that was emerging, and think that we can have a prosperous nation. It is not going to work. Let's say 2020, 2014, 2016, most people who were working, or most people who call the Ghanaian middle class, there's a social middle class and the economic middle class. The social middle class of Ghanaians were people who were probably earning, as per GSS data, let's say around 2,000, 3,000 cedis a month. Around that time, it was worth about, let's say, $700 or so. The average civil servant, who was a senior civil servant a little bit, and the average of between $700 and $1,000 a month, if we put it in exchange rate, these things. Today, those same people, their real salaries, I was calculating, if you're a teacher and you're a senior forgotten the name, is it senior superintendent or something? What you earn today is about 35% less than what you were earning in 2016. So such people are seen as, oh, they are senior, what do you call it, public servants or civil servants or whatever. Right. But in reality, their ability to feed their families has been diminished. Now, imagine if such a person has a dependent that he's trying to support to build a business. How can that business even grow and flourish so that they can even try and mop up and what do you call it, employ some of the jobless people around to create value? It is not there. Today, I am telling you that for all my listeners, for all those who have been working for about 10 years and above, if you were on tier 2, calculate your total tier 2, the value of your tier 2 contributions back in 2019 and change it into dollar terms. Calculate that tier 2 value, even with the increments of your salary and everything today, you would realize that in dollar terms, that tier 2 value, depending on where you are and where you work, would have fallen by almost as much as 45 to 50%, which means that today, if some people are going to retire, they would have been better off retiring 5 years ago based on the amount of dollar they could get and pull out from their long-term funds. This is a huge indictment on anything economic that anybody is trying to put out there and say that we are making progress. And it's a huge indictment to even the current regime and everything else, because it means that the little money that we have had in this country has reduced considerably to the extent that we cannot even go for alternatives if we wanted to, because it is like going into a boxing fight with your two arms tied behind your back. You will never win, and this is the situation in which a lot of us are finding ourselves. And it is difficult then to now think that we will have to depend on things like remittances from outside and things. But so many families are now having to depend on that. Now, even when those remittances come, and they are even supposed to even kickstart businesses and the rest, we have situations where we cannot even make enough profits to do that. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine got a contract, right? And the contract was such that they will make about 30% profit. But they needed a loan of $10,000. $12,000 to do it. The person secured a loan from outside for $12,000. This was back in July, August.
Yeah.
At that time, the CD was about 15 CDs or 14, 15 CDs or whatever it was. Today, the person has to pay back that loan. Even on raw dollar terms alone, the person is losing about 27,000 CDs because the person took it at around 15,000. The person has to pay about 170 something to 180,000 CDs. So these are the real problems that people are facing on the ground. And the fact that there has been a complete deaf ear by those who said that they are coming in to rescue this country tells a lot about what they have done and how much they respect us as Ghanaians.
Wow. Thanks for that, Selom. I mean, if you think what you've heard so far is bleak, well, pay attention, because Professor Godfred Bokpin is with us. And Prof, I know that the University of Ghana Business School, along with fellow organizations like ISA and so forth, have been concerning themselves with what is to come next. We are going into an election where all these potential parties and potential candidates are telling us that they will improve our lot. Inflation is galloping. By the time the next government is sworn in and starts settling in a year, 2 years from now, will things be better or worse?
Ghana is one of the few countries where water only flows upwards. If you are down there, you are not going to get some.
Yeah.
That typifies the structural inequality we are confronted with. So let's look at it this way. Whoever wins this election is going to face significant challenges because we don't have the fiscal space. In fact, Kojo, there is no institution in Ghana that you can point to right now that gives hope, that is well managed, that we can use as a starting point. There isn't any. Not the central bank with a worthless balance sheet, not ECG, and the rest of them. So I think that it's going to be challenging. But what will be needful? A lot has been said about the challenges, but what will be needful will be the next government putting a credible leadership on the table that will generate hope and confidence and say that, you know what, we have seen the deficiencies. We are building forward better. This is our promise. This is the leadership we are putting on the table. What do we mean credible leadership? Look, Kojo, in Africa today, economists are talking about leadership much more than motivational speakers. Because the starting point is effective leadership. Effective leaders will put the right structures and governance in place. So you can link effective leadership to good governance. It's not only at the national level, but of course, effective leadership at the household and private sector level, complementary, is very important. So, what kind of effective leadership should we put on the table? I am not expecting any serious party that will win this year's election to assemble a cabinet or a government size of more than 40 ministers. Then you are not serious. Then you are not sympathizing with the people. Because the point is that you don't have the fiscal space. So you have to adopt a lean, low-cost, efficient approach to delivery of public service. It will not happen in a year. And whilst I say so, Kojo, let's bear in mind that economic transformation, minimum, it will not take us less than 15 years of doing the right things consistently.
So even if we do everything right,
2 years and then 2 years off, no, consistently. That is where you will see the effect of leadership through good governance and then economic growth and economic development and sustainable development manifesting in the lives of ordinary Ghanaians.
Prof, I want to get some clarity from what you just said. You're basically saying that even if we make no more mistakes, we get everything absolutely correct from now on, we become perfect human beings and get every decision right from today onwards, it would not take less than 15 years for us to recover from the hole we are in.
Yes. That is, if we're doing the right thing consistently. You know, reforms are more effective if they are bundled together and they reinforce each other. So let's bear that in mind. And which also means that we require a certain level of patience. Without a good appreciation of this our democracy of 4-year term and all of that really does not allow us to put in place measures that will bear medium to long-term effect. So, Kojo, what have we done? With the recovery government is celebrating. Do you know what we have done? When you look at the measures the IMF program is implementing, together with what additional measures government is implementing, you will see that we are actually compromising our medium to long-term survivability for short-term praise. That is what we have done. We treasure short-term praise, and therefore we are undermining the long-term growth potential for short-term praise. Why am I saying so? Kojo, and you will see it very soon. If you look at and of course, Mr. Ken Thompson and then Selom have also spoken about the painful adjustment we've had to go through in order to have this limited recovery. In fact, by far, is the most expensive and pricey economic recovery in all our history since independence. You can check the data. That's the fact. Okay, so if you look at the fiscal relief from the domestic debt restructuring, I've said this before, and then also the external debt restructuring, approximately 90% of the relief are all going to be utilized by 2026. while the IMF supported program is in force. This is designed to make sure that the IMF supported program has enough space to be able to deliver on its objectives. The question is, what happens after 2026? What is the sustainability of this short-term praise? Those are the things. So I think we need to have a long-term view to our approach to economic transformation and inclusive productivity growth. This is not something that is going to happen in a week, in a year, or in 4 years. But what is important is the fact that we have credible leadership on the table, credible leadership that says no to corruption in any form that it appears. Lean government, cost efficiency, right? And all of that. So once you can do that consistently, you will begin to see how the macro numbers will begin to realign, and then it will begin to also trickle down to the micro and the household level. So patience is important.
Right.
But if we don't start doing the right things, then the 15 years will even be longer. That is a fact. And let's bear in mind that what we are going through, it will only take death to separate some people from it.
Wow.
They cannot recover. They cannot recover from this. Look, Kojo, the World Bank told us that in 2022, the central bank inspired inflation pushed over 850,000 people into poverty. Since then, more people have been joining that group. What are we seeing? Look, let's go into the granular data a bit. Maybe it will help us. Kojo, pre-COVID economic fundamentals, where inflation was 7.9% at some point in time before COVID and all of that. If you look at that data, you realize that there was practically no difference between food inflation and non-food inflation. But let's look at post-COVID recovery that we are celebrating now. You see how COVID actually exposed our food vulnerability. So right from COVID, we saw food inflation rising significantly, far above non-food inflation. Then we also saw that the regional district level differences in price development also started magnifying. So this is a country where income levels are very low, and 42 to 44% of household expenditure is on food, and food inflation has gone up significantly. Let's even say that this is recovery we should celebrate. If you come to terms with the fact that between October last year and October this year, prices on the average have risen by 22.1%, you cannot celebrate this. It will only take average people to celebrate this average as outstanding. By what standard? It's still very high. What can you do in an economy with an inflation of 22.1% when the CD has lost more than 25% of its assigned value from the beginning of the year? So it's even difficult planning. Look, when you submit a bid today, it cannot be valid beyond 2 weeks. Oh wow! So you can't submit a tender and bet on your pricing for beyond 2 weeks. So what it means is that if you invest beyond a 2 week period, chances are that it's going to affect you. And we need to invest for long term. People need to plan for long term. So we are denying businesses, individuals, the ability to plan for the long term and commit to long term investment. See what the banks are also doing. They will prefer to lend short so that they benefit from repricing, because the further you look into the future, the more darkness you see. This is not helpful. A nation, we should not take our people through this. And this is an indictment on leadership. And I'm a bit disappointed in the MPP. And let me say this, and I want to ask Ghanaians to forgive me in advance. And Kujo, do you know why I'm asking for forgiveness in advance?
Tell us.
If you look at the assembly of the MPP and the intelligence and the knowledge base of the party, typically you could say that the MPP holds the birthright to Ghana's economic management. How do you deliver something like this on the table? Are we not ashamed? For all that we know, for all that we have studied, for God's sake. And we have traveled. We have seen what has been happening elsewhere. Haven't we been to Tokyo? Haven't we been to Singapore? Haven't we been to UK? Haven't we seen things? Haven't we seen how they've made life user-friendly for their people? Why do we do exactly the opposite here? Let me tell you something. In Hosea 4:6, the scripture says that for lack of knowledge, my people perish. But Ghana is perishing not because of lack of knowledge. We are perishing out of willful act because we don't love one another. You may know so much, but if you don't mean well for people, your knowledge will deliver less outcome. It's wickedness. What we are seeing here is wickedness. Exactly what some Ghanaians went through during the slave trade. To the extent that there were some people who were benefiting from the slave trade, it was okay to allow it to continue, while the majority look on. This is what we have done to ourselves. Any Ghanaian who is in any position, all that he or she is looking at is how I can protect my interests and my family and probably my friends for the foreseeable future. It's not about how I can leave a legacy for people to be happy. What are we leaving behind for the next generation? Should the next generation feel sorry that we came ahead of them? Look at what we've done to our water bodies. Do we expect the IMF and the World Bank to come and tell us that we need to manage our environment well? Come on. Why are we giving more evidence to the fact that the black race is just incapable?
Prof. Prof is letting my blood pressure come, wahala. But I mean, look, you've given us so, in fact, all three of you have given us so much to think about. Uncle Ken Thompson says that it's going to take about 63 years for us to get back to 2016 levels, right? He says that we have presided over the largest transfer of private wealth into government or state control. Yet, look at where we are. Selon Brantier says that, look, as people, we don't understand value creation. We don't know how to make something out of nothing or to add value to things. And Prof. Bokwin reminds us that for some of us, it's too late. Only death will separate us from this new level of hardship that we have now been introduced to. And he likens what we are going through to slavery. Look, I've been signaled that our time is running out, and that's a pity, because Prof, Uncle Ken and Selom, I need the three of you to promise me that you come back together with us tomorrow to deal with this matter and look at the solutions, because this conversation is only halfway through. So I beg of you, if we can get you back tomorrow, we would love to start exploring the solutions to this. I mean, can we expect any potential strategy from the next government to attempt to correct this? How have we been 8 years with a government that took the most revenue, the most taxes, the most loans, domestic debt exchange, all of these things, and yet we are in the doldrums? The most oil revenue, all of this, and yet we are here. We have to talk about it. So please, Prof. Bokpen, Selom Brantier, Uncle Ken Thompson, I beg of you, let's reconvene tomorrow to finish this conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. God bless.
Slight correction.
Yes.
So I'm the former CEO of Dalex Finance. This is slight correction.
Of course. Thank you for that. Ken Thompson is the former CEO of Dalex Finance. He's a thought leader at business on business and economic matters. He's a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. Professor Godfred Bokpen is Professor of Finance and Economics at the University of Ghana Business School. And Selom Brantier is the Vice President of Imani Africa.